This is Genre Books. It's Tuesday, it's Tag Tuesday, and it's Christmas tag time. And I was tagged in an original tag from Renee at Beyond Books. This is the Christmas music tag. Prompt number 1, Joy to the World, a book that brings you so much joy you wish the world would read it. Well as it being Christmas, it's also, with December, the winter of Wyndham. This is an event created by Gareth at Books, Songs and Other Magic, and read some John Wyndham over the winter. I would recommend to anybody to read The Midwich Cuckoos. I think it's my favourite of his books. That's difficult because all of his books that I've read are fantastic. Day of the Triffids, Trouble with Lichen, Chrysalids, Kraken Wakes. I have liked pretty much everything. Maybe not so much The Outward Urge, but I think The Midwich Cuckoos tops the lot. It is pure, unsettling, scary. I think I would recommend almost any Wyndham, but I would recommend The Midwich Cuckoos as anyone's first Wyndham if they've not read any before. Prompt number 2, Let It Snow, a book that takes place in a snowy, cold environment. Well, I don't have to make this festive, do I? So I'm going to go with The World in Winter by John Christopher. Like a couple of John Christopher books, is about a disaster befalling the world. I think his most famous book in that regard is The Death of Grass, or No Blade of Grass, I think was its US title. But The World in Winter details a rapid shift in climate. It's not entirely explained why this has happened, but the temperature drops and stays dropped. America freezes over, as does Europe, and it, like The Death of Grass, shows how gossamer thin the patina of civility and civilization there really is in the world. As things go bad, the people go worse. So far, so apocalyptic, but where it gets interesting is that they do have to up sticks and go somewhere that is warmer. Not that there are very many sort of tropical places left, but eventually everyone in Europe seems to be migrating to Africa, which is a neat inversion of what things were when the book was written, and to an extent what they remain today. And they turn up, our main characters arrive in Africa to find that they are second-class citizens. The dialogue between the developed and the developing world is turned on its head. The story is a solid one. The characters they're very British, by which I mean they're sort of very repressed until they snap. But it's a fun read, and winter might be a good time to tackle this one, but maybe save it until the temperature really drops. Prompt number 3, You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, a book with a main character or one you just didn't like. Well, I'm actually going to talk about a series of short stories that I really didn't like. I don't like talking about books and stories that I hated very much, but I'll make an exception here because this really was beyond the pale. Anthony Gilmore is the pseudonym for a pair of writers, D.W. Hall and Harry Bates. And what really hurts in this is that Harry Bates can write some really good stuff. He's probably most famous for a short story called Farewell to the Master, which became the film The Day the Earth Stood Still. But this series of stories, The Adventures of hawk casts are awful. I talk a lot on this channel about pulp stories and a lot of older books as well, and I have frequently, and will have to in the future, have to use the phrase, this book was of its time. Which is just my way of saying, there are some things you do not agree with in this book, but it's an enjoyable book anyway. So these are frequently lazy, nasty stereotypes around race and sex. But these stories, I think, hands down, were the worst offenders. I don't think... Oh, there was a fifth story. I don't think I even got to it. I don't like to DNF things, but it was just a step too far. I think you might like to convince yourself that, do you know what, if Burroughs was writing these days, then he wouldn't be writing. He wouldn't be using language like this, for example. I'm not so sure that was the case here. I was not convinced that the goodness of the writing outshone the badness of the language. But that doesn't mean that there's a bad character. In a way, the bad character is the pseudonym that's created by these two authors. He's truly terrible, Anthony Gilmore. But the main character, Hawk Cass, is another reason I don't like the books. Hawk Cass isn't the racist in these stories. He's not the sexist in these stories. But he's not anything. It was a very, very bad choice by the writers to show his defining characteristics as being a monotone, even voice and a completely unexpressive face. He sort of speaks at a very controlled whisper. It did not make for a good hero, one that you can pin no characteristics on at all, other than he is very capable. In fact, he didn't really show much capability in the books either. It was just his reputation, and his reputation, the way other people spoke about him when they encountered him, bore no resemblance to the character that was being portrayed. I was pretty much soured on the stories anyway, but having such a weak protagonist really was the final nail in the coffin. Anyway, let's continue to talk about something I might like instead. Prompt number 4, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, a book releasing soon that you can't wait to read. Okay, so the festiveness continues. I'm waiting for the paperback release of Annie Jacobson's Nuclear War, a Scenario. And that is because I don't really go much for new books. I couldn't tell you which authors are releasing a new novel. So I'm choosing a book that I wanted to get, but I thought I'll wait for the paperback, and I've not seen the paperback yet. Obviously, it's the read what you own challenge at the moment, and I'm avoiding bookshops. But Nuclear War, a Scenario, is a work of non-fiction. Annie Jacobson has interviewed an awful lot of people who were in positions of power in the US military, and trying to tease out exactly how quickly a nuclear exchange could escalate. So it's a Merry Christmas. Prompt number 5, 12 Days of Christmas, a book of short stories. Well, I'm going to choose something which references another book event, which is beginning in December. Christmas Stories Resurrecting a Victorian Tradition, I think it's called, which is created by Revenant Reads, and we are reading ghost stories. There's a there is a group read. I'm not choosing that. For this prompt, what I'm choosing is the anthologies given by the British Library. They have a Tales of the Weird series of books that they have, where they find stuff that hasn't been published for a while, and put it out in themed books. So you'll find ones about, I think there's one about East Anglia, there's one about Promethean horrors, there's one about witches, Atlantis, and there are 4 now, I believe, Christmas collections. I'm going to be reading one this December. This is Sunless Solstice, and 2 that I read last December. I'm going to choose one of those for this prompt. Chill Tidings. It's a collection of ghost stories. What more do you want? It's Algernon Blackwood, Charlotte Riddell, L.P. Hartley, Elizabeth Bower. There's a few others. The book, unfortunately, is in the garage, so I can't show you my copy of it, but I recommend those collections to anybody. Prompt number 6, The Little Drummer Boy, a book that brings back childhood memories. I'm going to choose one. It sounds a bit silly, but maybe it's because the film The Great Escape always seemed to be on at or around Christmas time. Sometimes Easter, but it used to be on at Christmas, and it became a little bit of a joke and a byword. It's probably one of those things where it was only ever shown sort of twice at Christmas, but twice, 2 Christmases in a row at the right time is enough to get an urban myth going. But a story of escape in World War II. I remember reading, when I was a child, The Wooden Horse by Eric Williams, and it's just a great adventure story. I can't really explain the premise of the story without giving it all away, but it is, I think it's non-fiction, and it is the story of an escape from prisoner of war camp. 3 British officers make their way out. Prompt number 7, Deck the Halls, a book that has a party scene or takes place during a holiday. I'm going to choose one of my favourite books that I've read in this last year, which is The Question Mark by Muriel Jaeger. Now, this is a dystopian work that predates by a good half dozen years Brave New World from Aldous Huxley, and has a remarkably sort of similar society, and has a class of people who are on a perpetual social circuit. There is a definite elite and working class, and the elite, some of them do an awful lot of work. Quite a few of them do absolutely nothing other than enjoy the fruits of the labour of everybody else. There always seems to be a social function happening. Whilst that sounds nice in a way, it really isn't. So you have a group of people who are perpetually living life on the surface, but there is a depth there of nastiness that is waiting to come out at any given point, but when that happens, it will all be ignored anyway. So dystopian as it is, it's probably still better than some of the parties I used to go to. Prompt number 8, Frosty the Snowman, a book with a character who is cold or calculating. Any excuse for me to show off Arthur C. Clarke, 2001, A Space Odyssey. And, there is a reason I show this one off whenever I can, not because it's really tatty and battered and should have been better looked after by me, but because there you are, to Gavin from Arthur C. Clarke. Anyway, brag out the way. That book has Hal 9000. He is the ultimate cold calculating character. He is an artificial intelligence who kills. He is a single, unblinking, red eye boring into you. And you can't read that book without reading his lines in that voice. So this has all been rather festive. I should probably read more Christmas themed books. Bonus question. Do you have fond memory or an interesting holiday tradition that you'd like to share? I think probably our Christmas traditions are like most people's. I think we were doing Elf on the Shelf quite early. And our Elf on the Shelf looks different from the traditional Elf on the Shelf. He's a stuffed elf. Or she. I think we disagree on the sex of the elf. That tradition probably became a little bit less interesting over the years. As the children grew up, they're no longer interested. As the years went by, I think we became less interested to find something wacky for the damn thing to do every night. I record these on Sunday morning, so it is the 1st of December. There is a Christmas tradition we've had, and I don't know if anyone else does this. The kids have pancakes on December the 1st, and I'll be making pancakes, even though they are now mostly grown up, and most importantly, not early risers. So in a way, you don't want to get the kids too excited, because there is a whole month to try and maintain that excitement. On the other hand, our first act each December is to, on the first morning, pump them full of sugar, because these are special Christmassy pancakes. So you have syrup, you have, God help us, I think marshmallows. I'm going to tag other people below the line. I'd like to thank Renee for creating this tag and for tagging me. And until next time, bye.